Hi, thank you for joining us for our panel, A New Take on Web Design in 2023. We're part of the IQnection team, and we're here to talk to you about some of the trends that we're seeing and how things have changed over time. My name is Haley. I am the marketing department manager. And if I think back to the very first website I helped build, it was in seventh grade in a Flash Java course. I built a website about Melbourne, Australia. So pretty fun. Greg, I'll pass things off to you.
Hey, thanks so much, Haley. It was awesome to be brought back on memory lane on Macromedia Flash. I have not thought about that in a long time. Hey, everybody, my name's Greg Kaywood. I'm the president of IQnection. Been doing this professionally, building websites for about 30 years, 25 of those here at IQnection. My first interactions with websites really were back in the day before we had these cool tools where we would hand code websites for clients. And then eventually we graduated into products like Microsoft Front Page. We use things like Dreamweaver. Now we're using WordPress and Elementor and lots of cool things like AI to build sites. So it's been a long road and I've been loving doing it. Let me pass it over to Tammy.
Thanks, Greg. My name is Tammy. I'm the production manager here at IQnection. I've been here for going on 3 years now. I manage the things on the design and development side, so I'm involved in almost everything as far as website redesigns. I would say probably my first website I actually built was probably about 15 years ago. I was a free site through GoDaddy, but prior to that, I learned some coding before I think websites even existed. It would have been like in the mid 80s. I had to take a computer class and I had to learn how to code it out so that it would spit out my name and write it in the letters for each letter of my name. And that was like a big deal. If you could do that, you could pass the class. And so that was my beginning. Things have vastly changed since then. And I'm going to pass it over to Ariel.
Nice.
Yeah. Thanks, Tammy. So yes, hi guys. My name is Ariel. I'm an account manager here at IQnection, specializing in social media. And the first introduction to web design, web development was probably when I was doing MySpace design in my free time, just for fun, doing layouts and things like that. So that should have been my first indication that I should trust a professional, because I always had random words on the background, just random things happening that would not be there if I went to an agency or someone, but it was my first, event and experience with it. So as we grow, we learn, and I will not be doing that piece of marketing. So we trust our other development team here at IQnection. With that, I'm sure Randy has some other fun ideas for us in that space as well. So I'm going to pass it to her.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So like Ariel said, my name is Randy. I'm an account manager here at IQnection. I have 7 years of experience in this realm. But prior to all of that, I think the first time I expressed an interest in web design was when I was somewhere between 3 and 5 playing a Blue's Clues game on my dad's computer. He told me it was definitely too hard for someone who wasn't even double digits in age to do. He was correct. And so I probably didn't end up making a website until I was in college and needed to submit a creative piece to join an on-campus club, where I made a website full of really embarrassing photos about myself and little backstory pieces to make them choose my application. But grown a lot since then. Even then, like Ariel, I do defer to developers when it comes to anything coding related and really anything web design as well. But if it's all right with everybody, I think we're kind of ready to get started. So I would really like to start with asking Tammy a question. Tammy, since you speak to so many clients when they are moving into a web design project, can you tell us what makes someone realize that they're ready to pursue that project?
Sure. I think that people decide to look into a new website probably for a variety of reasons. It could be they're looking for more sales, or they want the ability to be able to edit their site, or they've seen some really cool new features on competitor sites and they want those. This is a variety of reasons, but I have to say probably a good portion of the time the clients that come to us are looking for specific functionality. Many of our clients, specifically like our manufacturing companies, they're looking to automate and streamline their processes that they already have in place, and they're kind of outdated and they don't work. On the development side, that might include things like password protecting employee and customer portals. We see a lot of that, especially in B2B companies. Online quoting is a big one as well. There's a lot of things, typically back in the day when they've built their site, somebody's got to call you and be like, hi, I'd like a quote on whatever it is, and so it's it's time consuming and you have to have somebody on the other end of the phone. So online quoting's become a big thing that we've been helping people out with that functionality. And then access to data sheets and material information is also very prevalent within the manufacturing companies that we deal with. Another thing that I see a lot coming up as far as functionality people are looking for are our career pages and areas on their site. Things are changing vastly in the market, and a lot of people are looking for help. So creating a space that, not only can show a little bit of company culture, but has the functionality that can get, the people on the page to the jobs on the other platforms, things like that is definitely some functionality that the people have been looking for. I think that they come to us a lot of the time because their customers are struggling and come to them with not necessarily complaints, but, I wanted to do this, I'm not able to, they're calling in, links are taking them down rabbit holes they can't get back out of, things aren't grouped properly, things like that. And outdated processes like having to download a form and then print it and fill it out and upload it. Again, kind of circling back to things like the quotes and whatever. It's just very outdated things. So I think that by their customers coming to them and saying, hey, we're having a hard time with this, or I just gave up, it may prompt them to reach out and look for help in a website redesign. I know there's a lot of stuff on the account management side that the team can speak to also as far as experiences that affect, the marketing efforts as well that the companies that you hear. I don't know, Randy, maybe you can elaborate or.
Yeah, absolutely. I can also speak to this like from a personal level too, but I think that there is really a strong element of like just pure aesthetics that are with this. As you look like back through the analogs of time with websites, you can see that things have really changed a lot. I like 10 years ago, those like websites where you get to the homepage and it's just one big picture and the navigation. That was like all the rage. But sometimes you'll take a look at your website and then you'll look at a competitor website and be like, wow, I have missed so many trends along the way, and realize that, okay, now is the time. And I think that's especially true for folks who have more like brochure sites that don't have all those additional functionality pieces. And your website really is, for a lot of people, the first thing they see about your brand. So you do want it to be modern, you want it to be sleek, have all that functionality, and then just look like it wasn't made 10 years ago. But I'm not sure if anyone else has any other aesthetic pieces, but I would like to talk a little bit more about barriers. I think we all know that a web design project is a pretty huge undertaking for a company, no matter how big the company is or how small it is. So I think I'd like to pass it off to Ariel to talk a little bit about what stops people from starting this.
Yeah, thank you. So I feel like there's a couple things that really get broken down into the main factors or main barriers here. So one of them would be time commitment. So obviously when rebuilding a site or starting one from scratch, it's a lot of time coming out of, your own workday, maybe your team, and, finding that realistic timeline from beginning to completion is something that takes a lot. So it's not something that someone can just do on a whim and be like, hey, let me just go rebuild my website. It'll be done in like, I don't know, a week, let's say. There's so much thought and process and branding elements that go into it, and a lot of decision makers in the mix. So I think time commitment is definitely a barrier for someone, expertise and experience. So obviously when finding the right person, you want to make sure that they align in terms of your business model. If they have done other websites that are similar to yours, you'd want to take a look at their portfolio. So even that vetting process takes a bit of time as well. And you want to make sure that the people you're working with kind of have the same mentality or work ethic as you in order to get to where you want to go at the right speed and, in conjunction with the other projects you have going within your business at the same time. And then, of course, budget alignment. You want to make sure that everything makes sense for you and what you're looking for within your website. Some companies want to have a lot of different elements and features and widgets, and some other clients might want to just have something simplistic, maybe more minimalistic. So that all comes into play when you're figuring out your budget and the team that you work with and making sure that it is very much in alignment. And then lastly, I would say technical compatibility. So obviously there's so many websites, as we even mentioned in our introductions, that you could have a site that's built off of Wix, and then when you're trying to migrate it and modernize it, it might need to go into WordPress. So compatibility is a big thing as well. But I think Haley would actually have some good pieces to bring in here as well if you want to chime in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ariel. So I think a problem that we see a lot is that something will happen. A website will crash or there'll be an error, and that will be the indicator that someone needs a new website. And at that point, there needs to be a quick fix, an immediate fix that's a priority because you don't want things to have any downtime. So that's definitely that we see as a barrier is trying to overcome those, initial problem solving to get to the place where we can build something that the client's really proud of, that's stable and sturdy and on goes with the development process. So, I'd say, what was it, about 4 or 5 years ago when COVID started, there's a big transition to a lot of online business. And a lot of websites had to make some pretty drastic adjustments since then. And at this point, it's been enough time that there should definitely be improvements to your website since that point. So if you don't have that, make sure that you're considering a website redesign. But besides website crashes and errors that do come up eventually, especially if you're using some outdated technology, like Greg mentioned in his intro, that things are changing all the time. Tammy, I'd love to hear about some pain points that you hear from clients beginning the development process and who are looking for a new website.
Sure. I think probably the most common pain points, I would say, at the beginning of a completely new website redesign. I always get the questions, how long will it take? How much will it cost? Those are like the biggies at the beginning and the things that they need to work through because they're just unknowns. And so basically, I'm asked a lot, when will my site be live? If I come to you, you build me a new site, when is it going to happen? And like Haley mentioned, they have an issue usually, and the new site is their solution. So they're looking for things as quick as possible. They need an immediate fix. They want an immediate fix. But how long it takes to actually build a site is vastly different for how long it takes to complete a site and roll it live. There's so many variables in there. There's, like to Ariel's point earlier, many times like the project manager, the person that we're dealing with on the project is not the decision maker. So you typically have like C-suite and board members that need to be consulted. There's scheduling conflicts that prolong the process, approval processes for large websites. It takes time. And each time that you revise things, you have to start the process over again. So that's probably a big consideration and a discussion that we have at the beginning. And how much will it cost? There's always that. And if something's broken, like to Haley's point, when something's broken, they don't have the luxury of planning for this. All of a sudden it just happens, and it's like, oh, now we need a new site because the things that used to work don't work and it affects the business. So we need to get this, done now. Typically, it's a functionality type thing. And a lot of times the older the site gets, things break and they can't be fixed. So yeah, so the cost is always an issue. We certainly always estimate pretty accurately. I would say sticker shock is always, is not unusual because it's not something that they look into or plan for again. And the approval process for the budgeting also sometimes prolongs things. So that could be another pain point. But I would say some of the other struggles on a complete site redesign would be coming up with all of the functionality at one time. Building out a site that has like multiple plugins and widgets and custom functionality, when you do that all at the same time, it can be difficult programmatically. You need to kind of like, things can adversely affect other things. So there needs to be a lot more discovery and research and whatnot. So that comes up, and the sheer size of the project. Doing a complete website redesign is overwhelming for staff that's probably already has a very full plate. They have to jump in, they have to collaborate. It takes time and effort. There's like a lot more involved than just like them handing over the keys to the old site and then just getting back the new keys a few months later.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Sorry, if I could jump in really quick.
Sure.
I was just going to say that, a lot of times the businesses that we work with do a really nice job of bringing themselves and the company forward through time and kind of adapting and developing. And then they'll look back at their website and realize that they forgot to bring that with them. So I think what I see a lot is that people are frustrated with kind of forgetting about their website, and they're like, oh, we have so much way to go because we haven't been doing this for a long time. So that's definitely, I hear a lot in the beginning of the process.
Definitely. And I think Randy had mentioned something. I heard a great phrase, Randy, that you said is a decision fatigue. And I definitely think that plays a big role here. I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit on it. I think, the secret's kind of in the name with decision fatigue, but I think we don't talk about it in the context of, first of all, we don't talk about it in the context of web design really at all, but we also don't usually talk about it in the context of projects. Usually when people think of decision fatigue, they're thinking about ways that they can reduce their day-to-day decisions that they have to make. You'll read those articles with CEOs where they're like, oh, I wear a uniform to work every day, so it's one less decision that I have to make. But you do have to think about decision fatigue really throughout all levels of your company. So the project manager on the client side, just because that's not a C-suite level executive, doesn't mean that they're not experiencing decision fatigue as well. So it can be really hard to look at your website and, like Haley said, realize that you forgot to bring it along with you as you've made changes through your company, and then try to figure out the keys to the next great step with your website redesign. But it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to think about it as this one big 3-month, 4-month situation where you are making a million decisions every day and you don't know what the long-term impact will be. And I want to let Greg speak to this, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel that isn't so stressful to your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things, I've been doing this for roughly 30 years now. And at the beginning of a website project, people are so excited to get started. And then we ask them a question that basically shuts things down. And it's, well, what do you want your website to do or be? What do you want it to say? And it's like, for a lot of people, they haven't thought through that process and they haven't really invested in the marketing strategy or the upfront work in order to figure out what they need to say and do on their website to be successful. And that kind of leads me into a little bit of a new approach in the way that IQnection has embraced doing web design. And it goes back to that thing where we've been doing it for so long, and people often ask me, what makes something really successful? So, who are your customers that are very successful, or what are really great web design projects that are successful? And what they're doing is they're trying to like reverse engineer the process so that they can do something and also be successful. And my answer is, and you can ask any one of our team and they'll all say the same thing. It's not the business. That's not the type of business that makes somebody successful. It's really a unique owner and their mindset on how they approach their business. And the fundamental thing that they do somewhat differently than other less successful businesses is that owner commits themselves to a process of continual improvement, and they're willing to constantly engage with us and our team and refine their marketing, and they're willing to try things, they're willing to fail at things, they're willing to be creative, and they're just always pushing on their company, moving it forward, and they're relentless about it. And that is the formula to success. So if you want to be the owner of a successful business, do that. And at IQnection, that's what we've decided to build our web design process around. It's not a once and done, I do it as a project and I check out for 3 years, but it's a continual process of improvement. And that in the industry is called growth-driven design, GDD, growth-driven design. And it's a process of continual improvement where we don't go and launch massive websites and forget about them for years, but rather we focus on a marketing hypothesis, a problem that we want to solve. And it can be any sort of hypothesis. It could be, I want more conversions on my website. I want to drive more phone calls to my customer service team. And then we come up with a solution that we implement and we test it and we analyze that solution and we decide, did it work? And if it didn't, we want to fail fast so we can come up with a new hypothesis and try again. And what this puts us into is an iterative cycle of continual web design process improvement that lasts not months, but years. But it's done in little chunks based upon research, theories, hypothesis, analysis, results, and then we just turn that wheel again and again. And it's a really, really fantastic approach to web development. And it's super intuitive if you think about it, that that's the way websites should work. But we're so used to doing marketing from the back in the days of like print work, where you produce a postcard or you produce a brochure and you mail it out and it's gone. You can never get it back. But with, websites, it's technology. You can update your site every day, multiple times a day if you want. So why put a huge effort into something to find out that it's failed? Do lots of little iterative design processes, lots of little theories, lots of little tests, and then find out what's successful, what's not successful. Be reactive to your customers, hear from them, solve problems, but most importantly, never stop, never give up. And that is our design process. It's the GDD process. We absolutely love it. Anybody have any thoughts on that and the experiences around the GDD that we run with our clients?
Yeah, I mean, so I think GDD is a really cool concept. It kind of eliminates a lot of these barriers and initial problems that we see that people run into because, they have this more current website that it's a small step rather than a large leap to get to where you want to be. And I find that, not only do the websites keep current with current website trends that you're seeing out there, but they work really well and they work to their customers' needs. If anyone has anything else, feel free to hop in. But
I wanted to piggyback off of that and also just mention that, obviously it's very important for Google to see that your website is constantly being updated. Google prioritizes businesses and companies that are always pumping out information that's useful to a searcher or any kind of user that's looking for specific information. That is something that automatically helps you in the ranking. So if you're making incremental changes each month, you just get the added benefit of Google recognizing that, ranking you differently than, like let's say your competitor that hasn't touched their website in 8 months. So that is also a benefit of GDD.
One more thing, kind of to piggyback off of both of those points, or I guess kind of call back to other barriers that we talked about. I think something that happens often is folks will move into a web design project and have really cool ideas. And then sometimes those ideas are put on the chopping block for the sake of budget or for time because they just want to get their new website out. So I think this kind of incremental approach where I mentioned decision fatigue earlier, where you're not making these like earth-ending decisions between the different things that you want your website to do, and instead saying, we're going to work on this now, and then we're going to work on our next big dream thing in 5 months when we've had a little bit more time to think about it, really opens a lot of the doors for possibilities and really lets what used to be kind of a basic website with a contact form turn into something that's not just a tool for the business, but a tool for their customers as well. But Tammy, I know you had something to add too, so it's your turn.
Yeah, I was just kind of on the development side of this. Not only are you, getting current marketing trends and things that you guys are working with the client with, but the site itself on the development side, each time we're going in, updates are being performed so that you don't have things that break because they haven't been updated or they're clashing with things or whatever. So that gives us the ability on the development side each time we go in there to make sure that things are current and make those changes. So there's a lot less maintenance down the road.
Yeah. One of the things that I really like about the GDD, growth driven design development process, is that it really fundamentally reduces risk from the process. And risk inserts itself into the web design process in a variety of different ways. But the biggest, by far the biggest, is a cost of opportunity. So a lot of business owners think about websites as a liability. It's a cost, and they want to reduce the expense of getting a website down to as close to zero as they can. And they're successful at doing that. They find the lowest budget designers they can, friend of a friend, somebody still in college or high school to design a site for them. And they're very good at reducing that liability. But what they miss is the opportunity cost to their business. And that is the risk that really can impact you in ways that you cannot imagine if you're focused on liabilities. Your website is not a liability, it's an asset that needs to be grown and nurtured over time in order to produce results for you. And there's just one statistic that really makes that just so true to me. And it's that 90% of your customers' first interactions with your company occur through websites, your website. And if you are willing to risk that interaction and potentially have it a negative or neutral reaction and really focus on the liability side and the cost to produce side of a website, you are missing opportunities to wow your prospects, to wow your customers, to increase the services that you can provide them, to capture their business, and to really wed them to your company and let them understand who you are and what your culture is. So we think of websites not as liabilities, but as assets. But there's another opportunity cost that I want to highlight, and I'm going to pass it to Haley for this one, which is to talk about the timelines that go into a web design process and a GDD process.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so they are pretty different, what you'll see. And one cool piece about GDD, growth driven design, is that that upfront barrier of price is actually distributed down the line. So you're kind of eliminating that need for that huge payment that you might get with a development process. So I really like that aspect about GDD. I feel like it gives, the clients that I work with an opportunity to really make the best out of their results, because you have the time that you're looking at your website over time to make changes and adjustments and kind of use the information that you have to make data-driven decisions that will help bring the website to a better spot. So a really common question that I get from people who begin the GDD process is, what does the timeline look like? When are we going to see a new website? And the honest answer is that it is an ongoing timeline. Like we mentioned, it's a process that you never really want to stop, because if you stop, then you're going to need to start fresh from the beginning again. But if you're able to kind of make these small adjustments over time, you're really never going to need a brand new website. Things are being updated. Like Ariel mentioned, in Google, they really love to see fresh websites. You have more opportunities to incorporate some SEO features like keywords in new content instead of just one blast and then waiting. What do you guys think? Any other pieces of the timeline that you see as vital pieces that we work through?
I have one thought actually, which kind of goes to Greg's point as well in terms of opportunity cost, and kind of coincides with yours as well, Haley. So I'm also just thinking, if you were to go out on your own and try to find different team members, let's say you're having a startup business and you want to, create this whole new website. If you're going on to other platforms like, let's say, Fiverr or Upwork, and you're like, okay, I need a copywriter, I need a developer, designer, all those things, you're kind of outsourcing to different people who aren't all working, cohesively. So then you're having the opportunity cost, I guess, in a sense of, you're taking on a new managerial position and you're actually losing out on more time because you don't have a tight knit group who knows all of the communications that are going on behind the scenes on, within the business. So you're kind of taking that risk of managing all these other people and then taking more time that you could have been, putting into other projects and business deliverables and things of that nature. So I think it's an important point to mention that these other platforms are great, but it can delay your process because there could be miscommunication and mistakes made along the way because there's not that clear line of communication. So just in my thought process, that's something that made me think of that. But if anyone has anything else.
I can probably hop in there too. Same goes for a website. There's a lot of different tracking methods that you can look at. And part of the growth driven design is being able to use this data to build a better site. So Ariel, I'd love if you could go into kind of ways that you measure and track success on websites and kind of what analytics you're looking at.
Yeah. So there are so many, but I will try to boil them down a bit. And then obviously feel free to jump in wherever you guys find, you have something to include. But I think that first up, you'd want to look into your website analytics and you want to prioritize that. So that would be different data points like page views, your bounce rate, the amount of time a user spends on your site, and then, of course, your conversion rates. So these data categories would help you understand how visitors interact with your site and then where your weak points are that you'd like to improve with your new site. Then after that, I would definitely say user behavior. So you'd want to have a good understanding of how your users interact with their site. So tools like Hotjar heat maps or Google Analytics behavior flow funnels. Both of these help identify which areas of your website are the most popular or problematic for users, and then it helps you, readjust and fix any kind of fix any kind of bugs or anything that is preventing you from bringing your customer or client to the final conversion button, whatever that may be. That may be a contact fill out form, a direct call to your business. Those all come into play. And then lastly, I think it's important to look at traffic sources. So it's important to know where your website traffic originates from. And you'll be able to see a breakdown of where your traffic comes from in terms of organic search, social media, referrals. All of those things help you allocate resources effectively and then optimize the content for those specific channels. Overall, you'd want these data points to be as optimized as possible, and that'll help you create a benchmark of where you're currently at to where you want to be. And then that would be discovered by comparing your website to, industry standards and then your competitors. So only then would you be able to dictate whether your current website is successful or not and where you would like your next website to be at. But does anyone think that there's other pieces that you think would go along with that?
Yeah, Ariel, great points. I just like to add that with website tracking and trying to make a better website, a lot of times with these GDD websites that we're working on, you can kind of integrate a CRM system within the website so you can track more than just general user behavior. If you're using something like HubSpot or SharpString Constant Contact, you can see specific metrics about users that you have their contact information for on the site, which is pretty cool and helpful if you're working with a sales team at all to try to have qualified leads. But Randy, you have talked about or have experience implementing a lot of different unique features onto websites. So if you'd be able to talk about what features might kind of help accelerate a website into success, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So I have two main things that I want to make sure we include in this conversation. The first thing is responsive design. We've been talking about responsive design as long as there have been tablets and phones, but something to keep in mind is that tablets and phones are upgrading yearly. So responsive design is changing little by little over time as well. Like, even if I just think 10 years ago, it predates my professional experience, but I was in college, so I heard a thing or two. But tablets were really common, so you were designing to fit whatever iPhone and Androids were out at the time, and you were also designing to fit those tablets. Tablets have kind of fallen out of vogue. A couple of people still use them, but they're really not what they used to be. So now we're designing for the next 11 generations of iPhones that have been in there since 10 years ago. So GDD, I think, helps you kind of handle those changes in responsive design trends because you are using this continuous improvement approach to it as opposed to a one and done, and we'll adjust it when we're on iPhone 25. So the other piece to this is accessibility design. So just like how your phone is going to upgrade every couple of years, accessibility technologies are upgrading as well. And it is really just imperative that we make sure that our websites are accessible to all people of all abilities. So this can take a lot of forms. This is making sure your website can be read by screen readers for people who have visual disabilities, making sure you can navigate via keyboard for anyone who has a mobility disability that would prevent them from using a mouse. But beyond that, there are a lot of other pieces that you need to consider as you are moving through a GDD project. So I think when we focus on responsive design and accessible design, we can really increase the amount of people who can use a website from a wider array of devices as well. But Haley, I want to pass it over to you to see if you have any other thoughts on cool features for GDD or purely necessary features like the accessible designs.
Yeah. So, in terms of accessibility, we actually had a really nice conversation the other day, Randy, about kind of like color contrast and being mindful of people with color blindness, kind of having those in back of mind and also incorporating just a diverse group of people in your imagery, making sure that you're including anyone who might be a customer for you. So, not leaving anyone out in that sense. And another thing I see too that really dissuades people from converting, in my opinion, is super long contact forms. They want to find out your mother's maiden name and your security number in their contact form. And it really, if it's more than just really name, email, and important information, I'm probably not going to convert. But Greg, can you talk a little bit about conversions through GDD and how it can improve conversion rates?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So the fact that we can even talk about conversion rates almost assumes that we're in a GDD process or some sort of ongoing marketing process. Because with traditional web design, once you build it, you set sail, you might check in on your analytics, but you're not going to have the assets at your fingertips to do anything about your conversion rates or your other KPIs. So KPIs, key process indicators, are really important to us as marketers, and they should be really important to business owners. And they're essentially the things that move a company forward and that we can track and report on pretty easily. So what we want to do when we start a project is have a KPI conversations with our clients and get on the same page about what's important to them and what metrics we can deliver back to them on an ongoing basis. And then from there, we use the tools within GDD to report back to our clients and to say, this is where we are, this is where we want to be 6, 12 months from now. And these are the hypotheses that we want to try and test in order to make those adjustments. And really, KPIs naturally yield into kind of a scientific method approach. And if you're familiar with the scientific method, you start with research, then you go to hypothesis, then you experiment on your hypothesis, you analyze, and you repeat. And that's really the same way GDD works, is we know what KPI we want to adjust. We want more form conversions, or we want more phone calls, or we want more time on our websites, or we want to rank for specific keywords, or we want to open up our audience to certain products, or we want reorders from existing customers. Those are all things that we can put into metrics, set goals around, create a hypothesis on what marketing activities we need to do in order to achieve those results. We need to experiment. We need to be willing to fail and try other things. And then we need to be able to analyze those results. So it makes web design fun. GDD means that we're constantly in there having these conversations about growth. And it's built right into the name, growth-driven design. Whereas traditional web design is called a web design project, which denotes once and done. It's a project. Projects end. Whew, it's over. I'm on to something else. Where growth-driven design, growth doesn't end. And it's driven by an owner and a marketing team that care, and it is designed for success. So that's what I love about GDD. And it's really the way the world should be doing web design now. And I want to throw a hard question out to everybody here on this panel. Tell me, guys, what you think the future holds. If we're moving from traditional web design to GDD, what are we going to be moving to 5, 10 years in the future?
I guess I can start if that's all right. Yeah. So, one thing that I would like to see, which is, hopeful thinking, is that there's a lot more of relationships that you form within the website design process. And it's not just a one off and done, but it's, kind of working collaboratively, like Greg said, and kind of working with each other to build a better website and future for the company. So I really would like to see increased relationships with customers and clients and kind of getting back to having that in-person feel of business through a potentially remote environment or website environment.
So anyone who's seen our previous webinars will know that I take a little bit of a different approach to the future discussions. I think when we had the AI one, I don't remember what my future theory was, but I know it was weird. And the last time we spoke about social media, I talked about how Gen Alpha is going to be going full avatars. They're never going to show their face on the internet, and it's going to be a secretive place, and they're all going to be in the metaverse. But if we continue with this metaverse line of thinking and building websites, I think GDD is kind of the foundation for how the metaverse will be built and improved over time. So cool to be a part of it in this way, even though it's really foundational and we're not really in that space. But I do see that is how the metaverse will be built out, because that's going to be how web design works overall.
The last panel we talked about, copywriting and AI and people being able to just pump out blog articles or new pages, written by ChatGPT. But now, of course, there's already tools that are able to fact check and say like, hey, this is written by an AI model or an AI tool. And then you're running the risk of putting that content on your site. And then, of course, when Google sees that, you're going to be striked or they're going to not have you rank as high. So I think it's just important to circle back to the fact that hiring those professional copywriters is something that I don't think will, fully go to extinction in 5 to 10 years. I think there's still so much value in the best copywriters out there. And hopefully, my hope is that we aren't getting rid of jobs with AI, that they will just become the assistants to what you need in your current or life, especially in marketing or B2B, whatever that may be.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I think we talked about some really cool things in terms of the future of web design. GDD, growth-driven design, isn't necessarily a new concept. A lot of the sites that we've been working on, we've been doing this process for a while, and we actually have a really interesting case study on our website. You should check it out about kind of the power of GDD and how it actually works. But until next time, we will see you later. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.